Hey, I'm Nate Savage, and in this guitar lesson, we're going to talk about how to use scales. Now, I know a lot of players out there will memorize a guitar scale shape and then feel like, why did I even learn this thing? All I feel like I'm doing is running up and down a scale shape and not really making any music. I know that can be frustrating, so in this lesson, I have 8 tips for you to help you start using the scales that you learn and actually making music with them. All the lesson resources, including the MP3 jam track that I have for you, can be downloaded at guitarlessons.com. And you can find the link for this lesson page in the description for this video. Now, for the rest of this lesson, we're going to be in the key of A major, and we're going to be using an A major scale to really focus on. Tip number 1 is to memorize the scale shape, and that may sound really simple to you, but when I'm saying this, I'm not talking about just, going through and kind of memorizing the scale shape. I'm talking about having it down so cold to where you don't even have to think about the shape at all. That's really important. So here's the scale shape we're going to be using throughout the rest of this lesson. It's just an A major scale, starting with the lowest root note on the 5th fret of the low E string with your middle finger. And you can follow along with the shape if you like. And if you don't know that scale, you're going to want to add it to your daily routine and just go over it and over and over it all the time until you don't even have to think about the shape, like I said. Until it just comes out naturally for you. Tip number 2, once you have the scale shape memorized, is to memorize the root note locations of whatever scale you're working on. So with our A major scale shape that we just went over, there are 3 root notes, and you really need to memorize those root note locations because that's kind of your home base or your point of reference throughout this scale. So you have a root note here on the 5th fret of the low E, root note here on the 7th fret of the D, and then kind of a mirror root note on this high E string up here on the 5th fret. And one way to kind of really memorize where these root notes are is as you play through the scale, just stop and pause on the root note. So and again, like I said, that's going to give you a good point of reference for all the other tips that we're going to go over throughout this lesson. It's going to kind of give you some anchor points to base your improvising on. Tip number 3 is to memorize and emphasize chord tones. And we could go a long way with this, but we're going to keep this to the main root note of the scale we're working on. So if you're playing over an A major chord and you're using an A major scale, you're going to want to emphasize the chord tones that are in that A major chord. In this case, it would be A, C sharp, and E, or the 1, 3, and 5 of that major scale. And to get this down, what you really need to start being able to do is visualize the chord shapes within the scales that you learned. So if this is your scale shape, your A major scale, the chord shape that kind of overlays the major chord that goes along with that scale that overlays with it is this E-shaped bar chord. That's an A chord, right? So those are going to be the chord tones in that scale. There's an extra one down here. There's another 3rd down here. So check it out. This is the A major scale shape, and then the A major chord shape that lays over the top of it. So these are the notes you're going to want to kind of emphasize and learn where they are and be able to go through them right away through the scale when you're playing over an A major chord, right? And you can kind of do the same thing. You could pause on them throughout the scale to start memorizing where they are and get familiar with the sound of each one. So. Those notes, the chord tones, are the strongest, most consonant, and kind of the most stable notes for starting to make melodies when you're using a scale, like when you're playing over the 1 chord, so that A, C sharp, and E, A, C sharp, E, A. And it's really kind of the first step to start getting out of the rut of just playing up and down a scale. and start choosing your notes more. Tip number 4 is also going to help us get out of the habit of just playing up and down a scale, and that tip is to use intervals. Now, an interval, all that is the space between two notes, and a major scale is made up of nothing but major seconds and minor seconds, or half steps and whole steps, right? Very major scale sounding, right? Now, using the chord tones that we mentioned in the last tip is using intervals too, because you have from your root to the major third, and then from the root to the fifth, or from the major third to the fifth as well. And that's using intervals. So I'm going to show you an exercise that can help you start using more intervals in your major scale playing. If you start down here on this A note, the lowest root note, what you can do is play that note and then play the very next note on the scale, and then go back to the root note. That's the sound of a major second or a whole step. So play that, and then what you want to do is play that root note again, which you already did when you came back to it, and then you're going to play the next note on the scale up, the major third, then back to the root. Then you're going to go to the next note on the scale, the fourth, back to the root, then the next note on the scale, perfect fifth, back to the root, next note on the scale, the sixth, major sixth, back to the root, and then you're going to go to the seventh, major seventh of the scale, and then all the way to the octave. And what this is going to do is going to get you used to hearing different intervals, and once you start memorizing them, you'll be able to call them whenever you want. So if you want to hear the sound of a fourth, and then come back down the scale, that's totally up to you. You'll be able to recall that. So this exercise is really good for getting to know the scale shape really well, but it's also really great for training your ear too. So it will sound like this when you do it all together. And you can do this in all octaves of the scale too. You can start on the next octave up of that A note, and do that. You can also work your way down too. Tip number 5 is to use sequences. And all a sequence is, it's a group of repeated notes or a pattern of notes repeated throughout a scale. And there are a ton of different sequences out there, and I'll kind of leave that up to you to go out and find the ones that you like and choose to focus on those in your playing. I'm going to go over one really common one right now just so you can get an idea of what a sequence is. And this is going to give some shape to your melodies and make it a little more interesting for different lines and stuff like that. So this is a 3-note sequence. You're just going to start on the lowest note of the scale and play 3 notes. And then start on the second note of the scale and play 3 more notes up. Then start on the next note of the scale, the 3rd note, and play 3 notes up. Same thing, start on the 4th note, play 3 notes up. Start on the 5th note, 3 notes up. Same thing all the way up. And you can work your way back down too. And again, that's a pretty common 3-note sequence, and like I said, there's a lot more out there. If you like the way that sounds, you're probably going to want to dig into some more sequences and add them to your repertoire and get really used to playing through things like that. Tip number 6 can kind of make us feel silly as guitar players, and it can seem really simple, but it's really important, and that is to sing what you play. When you sing what you play, you kind of break down the barrier between you or your mind and your instrument. And you can start off really simple. Just play up and down an A major scale and see if you can sing along. And from there, try the chord tones that we went over earlier. And then you can even try with the sequencing. And then once you can reach that point, you're going to start to notice that you can sing a line in your head or out loud, and then you'll be able to just play it on the guitar, which is really awesome. Tip number 7 is to understand the scale. And by that, all I mean is that you're going to want to dig into the theory behind the scale that you're learning. Figure out how that scale is made, the intervals in it, whether you can use it over a major or a minor chord, the tonality of it, and what chord progressions you can use it with too. For example, we've been using the major scale in this lesson. So when you're learning this major scale shape and learning how to use it, you would want to learn the theory behind the major scale too, and that's the major scale formula: whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and then all about the intervals in it too, kind of like we've already done with the chord tones and then the little interval exercise we did too. Now, if you need to learn more about how scales are made, you can always go to guitarlessons.com. There are tons of lessons on scales there for you. The final tip I have for you is to practice to music, and this can be done in any number of ways. You can jam with your friends, you can throw on a jam track and just improvise over it and work on the stuff that we've talked about here, or you can even write your own song or solo. To help you with this, I have a simple jam track that you can download and use to start applying everything that we've talked about here. It's in the key of A major, so you can start off by just getting your A major scale shape down. Once you have the shape down, try to memorize and emphasize the root notes. Once you have that down, try to emphasize and memorize the chord tones that we talked about. You can also throw in some scale sequencing, and then finally, when you have all these things down, just start trying to improvise with the scale and make up your own melodies and even sing along as you do it too. Here's an example of what this might sound like in your daily practice time. So first step, just get the scale shape down to where you don't even have to think about it. Then emphasize the root notes. Emphasize the chord tones. Then work on your intervals. Maybe throw in a sequence. And just improvise with the scale. That's it for this lesson on using scales. Feel free to watch this video as many times as you need to in order to absorb all 8 tips and start applying them in your daily practice time. If you want to see more lessons like this, either like the video, leave a comment below, or just visit guitarlessons.com. I'll see you there.